Jesteście gotowi?
Tak jest, kapitanie!
Nie słyszałem!
Tak jest, kapitanie!
Kto ananasowy pod wodą ma dom?
SpongeBob, kanciasto party!
Ciasty i żółty jak on!
SpongeBob, kodziaczek do tasty!
I fale ze śmiechu chce gryźć!
SpongeBob, kanciasto party!
There's not a Polish word for SpongeBob?
Poczuje się dziś!
SpongeBob, kanciasto
Gotowi?
party!
SpongeBob, kanciasto porty! SpongeBob, kanciasto porty! SpongeBob, kanciasto porty! SpongeBob, kanciasto porty!
Doesn't fit, but they made it fit.
Yay! Yay! Welcome to our episode about SpongeBob Piscesterdoposis.
Skittiastudapostis.
Hi, I'm the Wizard, Holden McNeely, with a spell for your whole ass.
And I'm the Bruiser, and I got my shield up. I'm ready to take some damage.
Woo! He's a tank. He's a tank boy, baby.
In the studio, as always, the #1 super producer, Marcus Sparks.
Well, let's go.
He's a pyromancer. He's a pyromancer and a necromancer.
We know he's a berserker. We don't even have to question whether or not he goes into rages.
And today's episode is about SpongeBob Squarepants. Jake, it was Jake's suggestion to do this episode, and what a wonderful suggestion it was.
I've been working on the internet for a couple of years now, and something that kind of has floored me is just that every year there's at least 4 new SpongeBob memes.
Yes.
There is something about SpongeBob Squarepants that has like ingrained itself into the psyche of every adult currently working or engaging with the internet. And I don't know what it is, but like I could only see so many still pictures of Mr. Krabs with the caption, "That feel when she keeps sucking but you already nut."
I cannot tell you how many times I've seen that on the walls of my own apartment alone. Because I go into when I get blackout drunk, I print them out and I just put them everywhere, much to my fiance's chagrin.
TFW go to class and the special kid says, "I brought my happy sword." And then it's like Patrick and he looks nervous.
SpongeBob Squarepants is like a total thing.
Yeah.
It's like a huge thing. It's on its 10th season now. It's the most successful independent property, I believe, that Nickelodeon's ever had. It's sold billions and billions of dollars in merchandise.
I believe the exact number is Nickelodeon has made $12 billion in merchandising off of SpongeBob Squarepants.
Whoa.
Which is, when we get into the story, is kind of amazing given that at its core, it is an incredibly sincere and artistically pure product.
Yes, and let's get to that goddamn core, Jake. Let's just drill our whole brains and bodies into the core of where SpongeBob came from, what has led to its such phenomenal success, and where it will go from here. We'll have our predictions corner at the end, like we always do, where we predict where the franchise will go, right, Jake? We do that every week, right?
It'll probably continue to steadily decline as more and more of the original staff leave. But whatever, it's fine. Ravioli, let's get the episode of Dolly.
Is that a reference to an episode?
It's all a reference to an episode.
I have to make a comment. I have never seen an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants.
Really?
Okay, I have to make an admission. This was like a crash course for me as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, again, it's kind of like the Power Rangers, but even more so. Just past my time.
Yeah.
I was just a little beyond it. And I feel like if you didn't have kids, or it's just within the realm of something I wouldn't. But looking at it,
here's what happened though. Us three, and probably a lot of people listening right now, are in this weird special zone because because SpongeBob came out when we were in high school. And that was the exact age where finally, after so much pressure, you could not admit that you still watched Nickelodeon even a little.
yes.
Yeah. Well, I've tried watching an episode of SpongeBob, and then he started talking, and I just went, ugh, nah.
Tom Kenny? He's like one of my favorite things about SpongeBob, and we'll get into that. Tom Kenny,
You're being a real
Marcus.
Squidward right now, Marcus.
Best friends with Bobcat Goldthwait when they were kids, Marcus.
I love Tom Kenny. He was awesome in Mr. Tail.
Stop doing that weird thing with your throat.
That's literally how Tom Kenny does the voice. See, like you can't do that laugh without it. You have to like physically push your fingers against your Adam's apple and your chin and go.
See, I like it when you do it.
That's because I think
it's
so
because
much
I can see you
to move.
It's like a much more optimistic, cleaner Ren and Stimpy, which I'm not against. I think that I would have absolutely shat my brain over it back when I was a little kid because I loved oddball, just weird, kind of strange. But I think, but it just had so much heart as well and so much positive vibes. And, I think that's what makes it so endearing and wonderful for all ages.
So at the height of SpongeBob, the people that were watching it were children, like 2-year-olds to 11-year-olds, and college students.
Stoned as fuck
college students. And we were stuck in the middle. We were like the eye of the storm. And so we just kind of let this cultural tsunami, not the right weather formation, pass over us. And so now that I'm seeing it on the internet, I had to like go back and just really try and wrap my head around why SpongeBob.
And that is what the name of the game is today, people. Going through and figuring out why SpongeBob. Why don't we take it all the way, get in the little way back machine?
No, the experiments haven't been finalized yet.
Yes, I understand the man was turned inside out when he walked outside
so
of the
many
machine.
chimps dead that we have to explain the way back machine is not ready.
I was talking to the way back machine, and by the way, the way back machine can talk. It was whispering secrets to me.
You gave it emotions?
Look, it told me to fill one cup with poison and one cup without poison. I want you to drink one of these 2 cups, Jake, before we get into the way back machine.
What has science done?
Okay, look. We're getting into the way back machine, and we're going to go all the way back to the origin of SpongeBob SquarePants. You can't talk about SpongeBob SquarePants without talking about the creator himself, and that would be Mr. Steven Hillenburg.
Now, I did a lot of research going into like the oral history of SpongeBob SquarePants. I read a lot of interviews with the voice actors and the writers.
Are you trying to show off right now?
No, I'm just saying that
trying to make me feel bad for not doing what you do.
I went digging, and no, I see. I don't have notes. I just have like 2 Wikipedia tabs, and I believe the words "Tom Wilson equals Biff!" ! But I could not find anyone that wasn't completely in pure reverence to Steven Hillenburg as a creator and as a showrunner and as someone that genuinely like kind of floored all of them with his just dedication and vision and sincerity. Like no one was like, oh, this hack, or like, oh, he fucked me over. Everyone was like, he was kind, he listened, and like when something didn't go his way, he was the first one to roll up his sleeves and like make it happen the way he envisioned it.
I mean, we'll get to it, but he almost didn't want to try to make his own show because he saw how exhausting and how difficult it was for others around him that he was working for while they were creating their own. I mean, this is a kind of guy that just seems very even and level-headed, and we'll kind of find out more about that. But the story starts in August the 21st, 1961, on a U.S. Army base.
Oh, an army brat.
You can't leave here, boy.
My crotch itches.
Oh my God, what's that machine? It says way back on the side of it. I don't know what. I'm being vaporized.
Good pastiche.
It was a callback to a joke we made 5 seconds ago. There you go. So improv training in New York City will give you the ability to do that. His father worked in the military. His mother taught visually impaired students.
Yeah.
And then they moved to Anaheim, California. But the real important part of his upbringing was that he became very, very into marine life. He was a part of like a dive team, and at the same time, he was an artist at an early age. His first drawing was of an orange slice. And he actually had an interesting drawing that the first drawing it noted that he got praise from was a drawing of a bunch of army men kissing and hugging each other. And his teacher loved it. And as he recounted, it was probably because the Vietnam War was happening and she was like super against the war. So it was really more like, but he didn't write it, he didn't draw it for any reason other than he just thought it would be like kind of funny or whatever, right? But I think that all goes in, we'll kind of get into the whole bikini atoll thing and everything, but there's definitely some interesting connections to war and some weird undercurrents that is heavily denied, but seems to sort of come out in this very innocent cartoon.
He'll often talk about in interviews about how his education was kind of torn between him getting praised for his artwork, but his kind of passion for marine biology and his kind of perception that was the more straight-laced, safe career path.
Absolutely.
That drove him to study that while still pursuing the arts and still creating these surrealist landscapes and kind of really like art was definitely his passion, but so was marine biology, and trying to bring the two together was just kind of the puzzle pieces wouldn't fit.
Yeah, he never could quite come to terms with the idea of like putting the two things together. It wasn't until years and years later. And another kind of interesting aspect of his time around in high school and after, he worked as a fry cook at a lobster boil in a fast food and lobster boiler in a fast food seafood restaurant, just like SpongeBob's occupation on the show. Knowledge for your ass. All right, don't fall over if you're walking to work right now, because of all of the knowledge.
I mean, I bet a lot of fast food workers would watch SpongeBob and be like, "Oh my God, how do they know so much about spatulas?"
So he ends up teaching children out of college at the Orange County Marine Institute, now called the Ocean Institute, I believe. He did this for 3 years.
You pet the there's like the little grab a starfish and let the kids go like, ew,
right?
And you learn how to tie knots.
This is one of those cool places where like you got to go there on a field trip at school, and it was like kind of the funnest thing you did all month.
I mean, like, yeah, math is cool, but remember that time a month ago where we saw an otter?
He said working
God,
there.
I love otters at those like maritime centers.
Yeah.
Oh, they don't know they're prisoners.
He said working there, I saw how enamored kids are with undersea life, especially the tide pool creatures, which of course would be the creatures we would later come to know in SpongeBob. Knowledge for your entire ass. Do you ever cry upon our knowledge? Let us know. Write us at Wizard and the Bruiser.
You've been playing a lot of Dark Souls.
Yes.
There's like a lot of lore getting dumped.
Ooh, that's the thing. That's how you really learn about Wizard and the Bruiser more. You got to read the item descriptions.
Hello there, Ashen One. Ashen One, this world it bleeds. Upon the goodness of man we break upon the soil. Did you know that Steven Hillenberg, the creator of SpongeBob, worked alongside tide pool creatures? In fact, he was tasked as part of the art department to create an educational comic book. And that comic book was called The Tide Pool, which featured a character named Bob the Sponge. Ashen One, free me with death.
And of course, of course, the giant crabs in Dark Souls 3 in the swamp, heavily influenced by the crabs in SpongeBob. Where were we? He, of course, writes this kind of comic book as a learning tool. He was approached by some people there who've discovered he was an artist. By there, I mean the Ocean Institute, which used to be called the Orange County Marine Institute. And it was called the Intertidal Zone, which I'm surprised didn't go on to be the name of the show. It featured a character named Bob the Sponge. Now, this Bob the Sponge looked much more like a sea sponge. It was kind of round. It looked kind of like a rock.
Asymmetrical, bumpy, yeah, like an actual natural sponge.
Like a real ass sea sponge. And he, along the way, and this actually ended up being very successful. Kids really loved this little comic book. He ended up being pulled much more to arts. He ends up in the experimental animation program at Cal Arts, studying under his beloved mentor, Jules Engel.
Oh, yeah, Jules Engel was a animator for Disney, and I believe his radicalization, the thing that finally made him like go, damn it, no, I'm an artist, I'm a cartoonist, is he went to like one of those Spike and Mike animation festivals, which were all the rage back in the day, and like it kind of opened his mind to the possibilities and the visions that you can bring to reality.
He was heavily influenced at one of those festivals by Paul Dreesen's The Killing of an Egg. Now, did you
I could not find
it?
that.
It's on YouTube. I totally found it, and it's really interesting. I would definitely recommend anybody who's listening to this go check it out. Especially go check out that, and then go check out his first animation project, The Green Beret. And
that
you'll find a lot of similarities between the two. And we'll get into The Green Beret in a second, but just to talk about Paul Dreesen's, I believe it's a French animator. It's really interesting. It's this guy cracking an egg, and every time he hits the egg, the egg on the table just goes like, stop it! What are you doing? Stop it, please, please, don't. Maybe he was Italian. And after he finally caves the egg in completely, and then you hear a knock above him, and he's like, "What are you doing? Hey, stop it!" And he stands up, and you see that his body is like a yolk, and it's like he's also like within, and he's like, "Please, don't, what are you doing?" And pretty much repeats all the lines again as his home comes crumbling in on him because somebody is, of course, bashing him inside his egg. And it's really cool. It's very simple. I mean, it's not like mind-blowingly awesome looking for today's standards, but it's definitely can be seen as interesting from back then. You know, and another thing I wanted to bring up before we get into sort of his foray back into art, he was heavily influenced as a kid by Jacques Cousteau films. Of course, the French oceanographer that would sort of talk like this.
The ocean is a place of beauty. The cuttlefish.
Man, I kind of wish Vati Vidya and Jacques Cousteau would like hang out and do like a sort of couch talking head series.
Here we witness the abyssal walker. His grim task has been fulfilled, and yet he still searches for the kill. Oh yeah, we did gloss over that. That is where his initial spark, because honestly, I feel like everybody goes through, like, you go through a dinosaur phase, you go through a space phase, and every curious kid will go through an ocean phase because it's literally full of monsters.
I was heavily frightened by the sea. I still am, actually. Those images, because that's become like a subculture kind of thing.
Thalassalophobia.
Yeah, those images of a tiny person and like a giant monster underwater that float around the internet, those still get me. Like, I just like freaks me out.
Do you know that if a lionfish looks at you, your dick falls off?
I did know that.
It's a potent toxin. Travels by a light.
But if you beat him on the head with your balls, it'll grow back. That I also learned from Vati Vidya episodes, actually. It's very weird episodes. He did a little run there about deep sea creatures. So he is heavily influenced by this stuff. He ends up working under Jules Engel, and I want to mention Jules Engel worked on Bambi, Fantasia. This dude is a fucking legend, and he would become his lifelong art mentor. This guy, I cannot tell you how incremental Jules Engel would be to this man, Steven Hillenburg, who would go on to make
CalArts. By the way, I feel like we've gone into this before, but CalArts animation program is basically the factory where most in our Cartoon Network episode, a lot of those guys came through CalArts. Right now, a lot of the people that work on shows like Adventure Time and Steven Universe went through CalArts. And Hillenburg was in the experimental animation department, whereas a lot of the people that will end up working on SpongeBob were like in character animation and like commercial animation, and were kind of less out there. They were kind of more focused on the industry of making cartoons. And this was during a similar time where animation was actually kind of going through a boom. Stuff like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, and just the even like movies like Space Jam and the Disney Renaissance, like 2D animation was a highly in-demand form of media at that time. So it was kind of like there was kind of like this big creative and financial boom happening in that entire world.
And I do think it's also important to note that he wasn't just in the animation program, he was in the experimental animation program. And even though he did kind of end up doing a more traditional route with SpongeBob, there are moments of experimental animation in SpongeBob where they're using different forms. And by experimental animation, the example I read was, using like sand, moving sand around to create images and sort of animation that way, as opposed to using formal traditional drawings to animate. And I think that's really interesting. And I guess that really popped into my head watching the first episode of SpongeBob again recently, where it cuts to when they're drying up in the third story, and it cuts to them at one point. The lady squirrel walks out with the tea, and it cuts to them, and it's just an actual starfish and sponge like laying on actual sand.
Yep.
And that definitely felt like, oh, yeah, okay, that's some experimental animation sort of at play. We're just going to cut to live action now. Or actually, now that I think about it, the what's the name of the band episode where they have to be a marching band or whatever?
I think it's just called Band Geeks.
Band Geeks, right? And by the way, I should mention for that episode, and we'll kind of get into this later when we talk a little bit about how they drew from their own life, but he was a self-proclaimed band band geek in high school, and I think that heavily influenced that episode as well. And at one point, they keep cutting to the audience, and it's live action audience high-fiving each other with
footage
face
from
paint.
the 70s.
Yeah.
Everyone has mullets and are drinking beers.
So weird. It's so weird. And I think that a lot of SpongeBob, even though it's sort of traditional in the sense that it's just drawings and movement, but I feel like the style is there, but they're always sort of morphing it and messing with it, and you can never quite put your finger on the animation style in a lot of ways. Like, it'll just kind of jump and be something else for a second.
Well, okay, okay.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, Jake.
So through CalArt's experimental animation program, Hillenburg creates Green Berets and another one.
And you did watch the Green Beret.
I did watch the Green Beret.
It's great. So the Green Beret is a little, and again, YouTube it, guys. It's so good.
Just
and ladies,
a Girl Scout has massive hands and things happen.
Yes, and I just want to make a connection between that and the egg thing, because she ends up smashing down houses. And if you watch the animation and the way that the house gets smashed in from the inside, it's very similar to the egg cracking thing, and you can really see the line of influence just coursing right on straight through his original work. And then, of course, Wormholes would be his other big project. Now, that was his big thesis project. He spent thousands of dollars on it. He also got a grant, I believe, to make it.
I couldn't find it online.
I could not find it anywhere, and
it.
I'm fucking dying to watch this thing, because it's apparently about the theory of relativity. It's this incredibly interesting artsy work. He put it into festivals. It's kind of what ended up getting him his big break, and I cannot find it anywhere. Though I didn't look super hard, but if anybody can, man, especially on the Facebook page or something, if you want to post a link or whatever.
Busted VHS of Spike and Mike's Animation Festival Volume 6 or whatever bullshit it actually got released on, we would appreciate it.
That would be super cool.
But that film got him the attention of
Joe Murray at the 1992 Ottawa International Animation Festival. And Joe was like, hey, why don't you come and work on a little-known show that I'm about to start up called Rocko's Modern Life. I love Rocko's Modern Life.
I didn't realize how much I liked Rocko's Modern Life until I found out that half of the SpongeBob staff was from there.
It makes so much sense, too. It makes so much including Tom Kenny, voice of SpongeBob, who plays the heifer, right?
I didn't even realize, because they're two kind of different voices.
He said in a quote, he's like, for some reason, I just keep ending up playing like lovable yellow creatures. I don't know what it is. Like very positive, optimistic yellow creatures.
Also, the voice of Plankton is Mr. Anderson. That's actually his SAG name. Like I didn't make it.
Yeah.
And he was the voice of Filbert.
Yeah. I mean, these are like
nauseous. I'm nauseous. Turn the page, wash your hands. Turn the page, wash your hands.
So, I mean, this is like the opportunity of a lifetime for Steve Hillenburg, in the sense that he got to work right alongside Joe Murray and immediately be a writer, a producer, an executive story editor, and work right under his wing and just learn all the ropes on how to make a Nickelodeon cartoon show. Just a crash course. Like what amazing. And I will say, if this guy's story inspires you like it inspires me, he threw his whole life into making Wormholes. He felt really risky about it, and he talks about how scary it was to move from a career in science to a career in animation, but he was drawn to it so much, he said, you know what, I'm going to take this risk, and then took an even greater risk by sinking everything into Wormholes, but he got it into those festivals, and he met the people he needed to meet, and it got him broken completely in to the world of animation, especially via Nickelodeon programming, and that is unbelievable. It's such a cool story, but it just goes to show that if you really love something so much, you will kind of need to throw yourself in the line a little bit to get there. And so,
I feel like we haven't actually had a lot of stories of people that kind of non-committedly half-assed their way to greatness.
Nobody. It's like all these people who were like, you know what, I want something more, and I want to pave my own way. And
also their entire families, the entire time, were like, no, you will be a money book person.
So let's talk about the origins of SpongeBob SquarePants, right? We've talked about the origins of Steven Hildenberg, but this is when but this is when SpongeBob really actually becomes a thing. As Mr. Hildenberg quotes, "I don't know if this is true for everybody else, but it always seems like for me, I'll start thinking about something and it takes about 10 years to actually have it happen or have someone else believe in it. It took me a few years to get SpongeBob SquarePants together." So the reason why I say that quote is because it would kind of been jumping around his head. Obviously, he wrote that cartoon, that little comic book pamphlet to teach kids back in the day. It had always been kind of bouncing around in his head, but it sort of stayed in the background, kind of, while he was working on all this stuff. While that's going on, he's getting heavily influenced by shows like Pee-wee's Playhouse, that sort of character, that man-child character that applies to both adults and children. That's somewhere in between.
Steven Hillenburg had a vision for SpongeBob, and he knew that it was a risk because if you're looking at the landscape of television, especially in the late 90s, it was about coolness, it was about sarcasm, it was about irony, it was about... it was more action, more like seriousness
and darkness and sort of, edginess. The
funniest shows on TV were South Park and Family Guy. Like, this was
and even before that, Ren and Stimpy was super dark and super twisted and weird, And
Hillenburg had a very old school appreciation for comedy. Like, his influences, he wanted to recapture the feeling of Looney Tunes, the feeling of Laurel and Hardy or a Jerry Lewis film.
Yes, heavily influenced by Jerry Lewis.
He would bring in writers and collaborators, some that he knew from working on Rocko's Modern Life, like people like Tom Kenny, who has an extremely old school comedy sensibility. If you remember him on Mr. Show, all of his characters are like ha-cha-cha Catskills throwbacks.
I love Tom Kenny on Mr. Show. He was absolutely great. And yes, he does have that sort of style and approach. One almost would describe that sort of character as a square.
Yeah.
Like kind of a square.
No, this isn't that's the thing. SpongeBob is not cool. And it was on purpose. They were explicitly trying to make a not cool character.
And it was also based on just that world that he saw children really latch onto, of that sort of deep sea, not deep sea, kind of right closer more to the surface, actually. All those fun creatures that you kind of come in contact now enamored there was. He said, it finally dawned on me that if I was going to do my own show, all those things I lectured about and obsessed about would make an interesting world. He actually had a person on Rocko's Modern Life read, what is the terrible name for that cartoon?
SpongeBoy Ahoy.
Oh, yeah, that's well, I was saying he originally read that pamphlet, the intertidal zone, and read it and said, you should make a show out of it, and really pushed and prodded him to do it. And then, yes, the original name was SpongeBoy, and the show was going to be called SpongeBoy Ahoy. But then they found out...
It hurts to say. Like, the taste in your mouth is...
SpongeBoy Ahoy.
But then,
it's bitter. It's bitter on the lips.
Thank God the name was already being used as a mop product, so they couldn't use SpongeBoy. And then they got SpongeBob based on Bob the Sponge, and then they got the word SquarePants when Tom Kenny saw a picture of the character and remarked, "Boy, look at this sponge in SquarePants," thinking he can get a job at a fast food place. That's how they got the last name SquarePants for him. He always talked about how the show's premise is that the innocence prevails, which I don't think it always does in real life. And I think that's what people loved about it, the escapism that you have in this pure joy and innocence of SpongeBob, while also being like kind of weird. Like, it's not a clean-cut show per se, like in the sense that, it's very normal and traditional. It's like super warped and goofy. And again, I only note that because that's why like really stoned college kids would super love it as well as little kids.
I remember getting super high in college and watching the movie when it came out. And there's an entire scene where it's about SpongeBob and Patrick eating too much ice cream. And like, even though the scene was about too much ice cream, all the close-ups and the expressions and the mannerisms and the animation fully communicated that these guys were getting on a blackout drunk bender. And I remember, and the quality of the takes and the visuals were so evocative and funny that I was just losing my mind watching that scene. a lot of the interviews, a lot of the people talking behind the scenes, people like Derek Dryman and Mr. Lawrence. Is that it? Did I say Mr. Anderson earlier? I feel dumb now.
Well, there's Barker's the talking dog, and I can't believe they let him help animate a show in the first place because of his paws and his inability to.
It's Mr. Lawrence, not Mr. Anderson. I'm sorry about that confusion.
I lied about the dog.
I'll talk about how they helped bring it like. Steven Hillenburg had this thing kind of fully formed, and all they could do was just add like little pieces to just like kind of like add flavor to this world. Like, Hillenburg designed like, that the Krusty Krab was like a lobster trap, and like that everything was made from like nautical tiki aesthetics. But like, it was someone else's idea to like, because you couldn't draw clouds in the sky, to make those big hula flowers in the sky. There was like one guy who added that. Another writer came in late, and like his original pitch was the split pants story. And so it was this vision that was like helped propped up by all these individual voices that he brought on. And a key distinction. Oh, actually, okay, let's go to the pitch. This is
I really want to talk about
pitch.
I wish there was video of this. I wish I could have been in the room for this, because right now I'm sort of thinking in this world and trying to kind of get better and perfect the art of the pitch and sort of get into that as I'm trying to pitch my own projects. And this pitch sounds so airtight and rock solid. I mean, the executives walked out of the room. They thought they were going to hear from them in a few weeks and find out whether or not they got the show. They left the room. They were gone for a minute. And they walked right back in and said, "We will take this thing."
Hillenburg and staff showed up in Hawaiian shirts with props, including a model diorama of the characters inside a glass aquarium.
Underwater terrarium, yes, with all the models.
A seashell connected to an electronic voice box that would like give out jokes when they picked it up. Hillenburg played his ukulele and provided the backing music as he walked them through the opening premise of the show.
And they did play the song that you hear in the first episode, the Tiny Tim song. It's like something in the moonlight, dancing in the moonlight, having
a wonderful time. Oh no, my voice is stuck like this now.
Oh no, Jake.
This is serious.
Do you think if we got into the way back machine, we could find a way?
No, we're not going back.
You're getting in the damn machine. It told me you're getting in the damn machine.
We lost so many good men.
I know, Jake. It's the way back machine. Would you like to get in? I'm not going to kill you.
Don't believe his lies.
I'm not going to kill you. Why would I kill you?
I unplugged you. How are you still talking?
Hey, I'm the Hey Mac Machine. I'm the brother of the way back machine. I'm a talking helicopter.
Jesus fucking Christ. Sweet, merciful God in heaven.
I'm a talking helicopter.
I declare a moratorium on all bits. No more bits.
I'm sorry.
You heard it first.
I forgot what show I'm on. Is this Round Table?
I want more of my Hey Mac Machine.
I'm the baby machine. I'm a train. I'm a talking train. That's the third one where they go to the Wild Wild West. And that one was panned generally by critics.
Also in the room was... we talked about in the Cartoon Network episode the kind of like marketing wunderkind that was Fred Seibert, and how he brought Nickelodeon to the forefront and jumped ship to Cartoon Network. Seibert was out. His protege, Albie Hecht, was still looking for a hit. He was like kind of the new guy in charge that was trying to like kind of make up for this for Seibert's leaving. Seibert. We never settled it. We never settled it. So it was Hecht's kind of real like push. He was rooting for this show, and this apparent legendary pitch that everybody talks about as this slam dunk, one of a kind performative experience that like took a room full of suits and made them into giggling children. Got the show, got the pilot approved.
I wanted to talk about a little bit of the writing process because I did find that to be incredibly interesting.
Are you talking about how this was a storyboard-driven show?
Storyboard-driven show, which is completely unique. Almost all other staffs were generally a writing-driven, script-driven show, but in this sense, they would come up with a basic outline, and then they would jump into storyboards, creating all the visual gags, all of the looks, and then off the storyboards, they would write the script. And this is what made the show, in my opinion, the unique sort of brilliant thing that it would become, and why it's so successful is this different approach to things. And I think it works so well for children's cartoons to make it driven by the actual visuals and the visual jokes.
I mean, that was the style of old Warner Brothers cartoons. It was about gags, like a character could explode and be fine the next day, next scene. It was, there's tons of old Looney Tunes references in the first season of SpongeBob. It is definitely the energy they're going for. A storyboard would kind of just like be like, and then so the script would say SpongeBob busts out a guitar and starts singing about how he ripped his pants. And then in the storyboard stage, they would actually be like, no, but like, what if the guitar was made of sand and the stage was made of sand? And then like a bunch of like audience members filled in, and like all the gags, all the actual like the funny things you remember was kind of taken up in the storyboard stage. And this was, teams of two would work on Post-it notes over the course of like 2 weeks and just kind of like throw away ideas, introduce new ones. As long as they adhered to the basic skeleton that was in the script, as long as it was funny, it was in the show. And
it's important to note that these storyboarders are also writers in their own right. Mm-hmm. And they had that going for them, that they weren't just artists, and they had to be able to kind of pull the show along in that way, and they were writing dialogue as they were storyboarding as well and doing things like that. So
but it was so everything from the inception of it to the pitching of it to the execution was singularly unique. This wasn't Rocket Power, this wasn't Wild Thornberries, this wasn't Fairly Odd Parents. This was a truly like unique show harkening back to entire eras and influences that were completely uncool. The character itself, people don't really think about this, but having a rectangle character was actually bizarre. SpongeBob is a very weird character design, just within the realm of animation history.
Totally. It's completely bizarre and completely just works. And I think to push that even further, the old-timey feel of everything, the voice recordings as well were all done in the same room like old-timey voice recordings. And again, Tom Kenny described it. That's another thing that's given SpongeBob its special feel. Everybody's in the same room doing it old radio show style. It's how the stuff we like was recorded. And that was always on Wednesdays. Everybody looked forward to it. They'd get together, they'd crack up, they'd have fun, and it really gave it again this feel of specialness, of uniqueness, and of a total throwback to bygone eras, and sort of being corny and being doing radio play as a new cartoon. For some reason it just fucking worked.
We did, we haven't gone into, but the vocal performances are incredible. Like
so
each
good.
character is. The characters themselves are very well written and very focused, but it's those acting performances that kind of solidified them. Tom Kenny, we talked about. Fun fact about Tom Kenny, he found out that SpongeBob had been picked up while he was on set during the wheelbarrow sketch on Mr. Show. The one with the wizard and like the dumb science?
Yes, so good.
He got a phone call and was like, oh, thank God, I don't have to be in a beard. I don't have to be in a fake beard and a wizard costume anymore.
Also, another fun fact is his wife plays one of the parts as well. I was trying to find who it is. Oh, shoot, I'll have to come back to it. But Jill Talley plays the Mrs. Puff.
Oh.
Pearl and the Flying Karen and the Flying Dutchman. All Jill Talley. By the way, if you could just imagine like how lucky their kids are to get to grow up in a world where dad is SpongeBob and mom is also like in SpongeBob.
You say lucky, I say every birthday party is ruined forever because now dad's the star of the show.
I guess that's true.
Tom Kenny seems nice.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's...
And that's the thing. And even better, bonus, when they start smoking weed, they'll love it all over again.
That's true. Patrick is voiced by Bill Fagerbach, whose previous
household name.
Bill who? Are you saying that Dauber from Coach wasn't a household name? Patrick is the source of like so many memes and is like a lot of really funny moments.
Absolutely.
Weedle. That's a reference. And the voice of Squidward is the horrifying named Roger Bumpass. Bumpus, I'm sure, who was like kind of this like lifelong voice actor workman who would actually show up to the recording sessions on a recumbent bicycle. And after a certain point, a lot of Squidward's own like kind of metropolitan eccentricities ended up just being direct jabs at him. Mr. Krabs, Marcus, you know who the voice of Mr. Krabs is.
I actually don't.
Clancy motherfucking Brown!
No shit!
Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of HBO's Carnival.
And Pet Cemetery too.
Oh, very fun.
It's fucking he's a nightmare monster in like every other thing, but he's Mr. Krabs, the jovial, stingy crab boss.
I had no idea. That's so weird.
I mean, he's and Lex Luthor in the Justice League cartoons.
Well, that makes sense.
He does a lot of really cool stuff, but like, it is like, depending on what generation you're from, Clancy Brown is either the scariest fucker you could ever come across, or like the most adorable star. I really find it hilarious. Mr. Lawrence did the voice of Plankton. He was a animator for Ren and Stimpy, who also worked on Rocko's Modern Life. He was also a story editor on the show, and more important than Plankton, he was the voice of like all the side fish characters that you like, all the quotable
Just
weird
the random
chocolate, like all those voices were Mr. Lawrence, and that was like an interesting like.
I love how most people's voice credits when I was looking at them was like a main character's name and then just and others because it just must be a handful, just so many different random ass just creatures in that place.
The way the show treats like the citizens of Bikini Bottom, just all those random ass fish that like kind of show up with like they become their own characters and then they don't. It's just if you need a quick cutaway gag, it's just a fish saying some random bullshit. It's so many funny jokes.
Now, do you believe the fan theory that it's Tom Kenny has come out and said that Bikini Bottom was based on Bikini Atoll, but that said, Bikini Atoll, of course, is the place where they did the nuke testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where they laid off they shot out the nuke or set off the nuke bombs when they were testing it before they did the old Hiroshima thing. Hiroshima. Do you believe,
make it sound like a dance craze?
do you believe they're all able to talk and sort of be like human-like because of mutations from the tests, or which has been denied, by the way?
I always appreciated kind of what we talked about is the experimental animation setup about how SpongeBob and Patrick and all the other characters interact through the lens of the real world when they're like out of the water or perceived through other people's like eyes. That it's just, if you can like get yourself down to their level, you can like see them as people, but from like a human perspective, it's still just a sea sponge in pants, a squid. Well, not a squid. Squidward is definitely an octopus. Like really, like just look at him. He's a fucking octopus. And a starfish just kind of like floating around. I honestly don't believe them. Also, here's another fan theory I'm going to shoot down. All the Rugrat kids are alive.
Yeah.
They're alive, all right? I don't care what creepypasta you read. It's not Angelica flipping out because she killed them. And both angry beavers are straight. God damn it. You fucks.
So I guess there's sort of also like a pre and post SpongeBob period. There's the pre the movie and post the movie, and that has a lot to do with Steven Hillenburg's Hillenburg. Jeez Louise, Steve Hillenburg. It's like I'm talking anime creators over here. Steven Hillenburg's exit from the show, which happened after season 3 and the movie. He halted production of the show after season 3. By the way, he didn't think it was going to go past really season 1. He was shocked that it was a huge hit.
The entire team just set off to make the weirdest, most sincere, fun show they could.
Yeah.
And like we're not banking on a follow-up season.
And so the thing got way more successful than he ever thought it would be. He thought he was just hoping for a season and a cult following. He ended up doing, after 3 seasons, he felt 60 episodes. That was generally the amount of episodes shows like Ren and Stimpy had. He felt like that was an admirable amount of episodes to do, that the show, for him, had kind of creatively run its course. Also, he had to halt production so that he could make the SpongeBob movie, because he essentially just was very practical about it, did his homework, his research, and for the most part, most people would kind of stop production, make the movie, and then, go back into the show that you can't really do them at the same time.
Being a showrunner is, especially for an animated cartoon, is one of the most demanding jobs possible. Everything has to run by you, different teams across several, you have to make sure the script writers, the story editors, the storyboard artists, you have to watch dailies from the animation coming in from Korea and adjust changes to that. You have
to learn Korean in order to speak with the Korean people. You have to make sure there's only brown M&Ms in the bowl.
There's a reason why Simpsons burns through creators. There's a reason why famously Alex Hirsch from Gravity Falls set out to do 2 seasons and was like, I am done. It is incredibly time-intensive work. I thought the movie was fantastic and worth it.
Yeah, it was really good. It did very, very well.
I didn't see the second movie, though.
I didn't see the second movie, but I'm glad you brought it up because that film he also came back to work on. But he left the show after the film, correct? And he
stayed on as an executive producer. I think he would just kind of he would Miyamoto it, just kind of walk in, smile, say something, and everyone had to just do it.
Yes. He would kind of oversee, he would just kind of give his approval to the episodes, I think, as they went. But yeah, he kind of took off. Now, do you felt of course, the quality, I believe it's gotten criticism for diminishing over time. It is now in its 10th season. Are there things past season 3? Is it still solid or what's the general opinion there, Jake?
A lot of fans, I feel are kind of at a certain point the criticism was that whatever edge or whatever transcendent quality that SpongeBob had in its initial run has kind of faded, and it was more about just keeping up the property for the sake of merchandising, which happens to a lot of shows, especially cartoons, because the actors work 1 day a week and get paid handsomely, and you can always switch out creative people.
And I should say, he wanted to end it, actually, but it was just making so much money for Nickelodeon, they could not have that be the case.
Which, the more I think about it, the more it is truly bizarre that this is what broke through. This was the breakout, omnipresent cultural thing. There was nothing bigger than SpongeBob. You see the story of a man-child who likes working at a fast food restaurant, and there's cutaway gags about there's the Nosferatu. Remember? There's a whole episode where the Krabby Patty is haunted, and then they resolve the issue just by being but wait, who is flickering the lights? Oh, it was Nosferatu, and they cut to a photograph of Nosferatu crudely animated flicking the light switch.
Yeah, it's odd how, even parents were enjoying this. And I think it's because of maybe references like those and the fact that it sort of had a little something for everybody to kind of enjoy and latch onto. I'd also at this point want to bring up the idea that, what I learned from this, for me, the personal moral of the story, and it's kind of had a big effect on me as I'm kind of in my own life right now, as I'm kind of in a state of sort of transition in terms of my sex. I'm a woman, and I'm going to be Marla.
I accept that way more than full-time Twitch streamer.
But, you hear the phrase, jack of all trades, master of none. I think sometimes instead of you do hear about the people who are incredible and excel at one specific thing, and that's how they became great. But I think there's way more people, and a lot of the people who we have studied on this show and sort of discussed, and it's really kind of opened my eyes. It's actually about finding those multiple things that you are deeply into, and finding ways to combine those things in order to create, I would love to use the last podcast as an example of
Marcus, you like violence and the art form of radio
and comedy, and you combined those things, and that's what makes it special. Not that you were really good at any one of those things, but it's the combination that's so wonderful and unique.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
And I like yelling in a room.
Yeah.
And video games.
I like
to read.
Yeah, I like video games and all these things we talk about on the show and comedy and things like that. So if you're sort of really into multiple things and you don't know which way to go, instead of trying to choose between one, maybe think about how you could put it all together, and that would actually probably be more interesting than any sort of one pursuant of any one of those things.
Oh, and give 100,000,000% effort to make that thing as at a level that you personally would enjoy.
Put your life on the line. I don't care if you have kids. Take that college fund, put it into your short film.
Daddy, why is there no food on the table? Sorry, Milliam. I gotta go be a pro trampolinist.
So yeah, anyways, I don't know. That was just my little thing, Jake.
One of the things that I really think about when I was doing this SpongeBob research was like when SpongeBob really broke, and looking at the list of like the most memorable episodes and which like individual bits kind of like spawned the most memes. There's like a big focal point around season 2 and 3. Which makes sense because that's when a show usually like hits its stride. They kind of nail down the characters and like the staff and everybody from the animators to the voice actors kind of have a better handle on how the show is supposed to feel. But it was also 2001, and like I gotta say it, in a post 9/11 America, shit got bad, shit got scary, shit got like upsetting. I remember I hope I'm not talking out of school, but like my little sister had night terrors for years afterwards because she thought terrorists were going to get her. And through that incredibly jarring and upsetting phase in American history, SpongeBob was there, and SpongeBob was innocent. SpongeBob was good, SpongeBob was funny, and SpongeBob didn't change. He was like the rock that kind of held it all together.
And he was innocent in a weird world. And I think that aspect is also really important. Not necessarily like a dark world per se, but just a weird-ass world. And I think the contrast is what really makes it great. Because if he was just innocent in like a children's show way, like in a happy, fun, friendly world and everything's good and everything's great, that wouldn't have been what made SpongeBob so great,
Maybe the ripped pants episode where he finds himself to be struggling to get attention through his physical strength, and so he resorts to making a fool out of himself just for any attention whatsoever. Maybe that resonated. I don't know. Yeah, it was just completely different, and kind of it's just comforting. It is a comforting show to watch.
So do you have like a favorite episode or moment?
I really liked the episode SB129, which is where, do you remember the SpongeGar meme from last year? Like that caveman sponge, or it's like you're at your girl's place. She said you're at your girl place, and she said you'd be all alone, and you hear someone pull up to the driveway. That's that's where Squidward, trying to escape SpongeBob, freezes himself in the Krabby Patty freezer, ends up traveling to the future where it's only where everything is chrome because it's the future, and SpongeBob robots are in control of everything. To escape, he goes into a time machine and travels to the past, where he comes across Caveman, SpongeBob, and Patrick, and they're animated so hilariously. And then the whole thing ends with like a trippy duck-amuck void that is incredibly, like, it was, if you were a kid, like, you would not have, like, there was like 18 memorable jokes there. Also, another really funny one, just even the pilot is so well constructed.
The pilot is so...
I'm ready.
The pilot is so good. I watched it actually earlier today, to be honest with you.
Help wanted if you're looking for it.
And it was, especially during the part where he's making the food and slinging those burgers, like I just couldn't help but smile. Like, and I think that I was like, oh, okay, this is why this is. It's just impossible. Hearing that Tiny Tim song and just watching him go to town in the kitchen, it's just impossible to not put a smile on your face.
Oh, Frankendoodle. The Frankendoodle episode is
where he
really
creates
well
a
done.
doodle of himself and right, and it comes to life. Yeah, And that's a really fun, I feel like, Looney Tunes callback to like the episode where Daffy Duck gets attacked by the pencil.
Duck Amuck again.
Duck Amuck, so good.
Also, you don't even need me to say this, but the artist that drops the pencil in the beginning is Hillenburg himself.
Yes.
And so it affected so many people across such a wide age spectrum that like something really interesting happened where like on the internet the go-to reference was for the longest time Simpsons and Family Guy jokes, and now it's SpongeBob.
Yeah, absolutely.
The touch point, like in a very fragmented world, in a we all listen to different music, we all follow different politics, we all like different books, everything is very fragmented, but the one like home base, the one place we can all like kind of just sit and agree like, yeah, that was funny and good, was SpongeBob right now.
There you go. Well, is that about it?
F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anyone, anywhere else, down here in the deep blue sea.
There you go. That's beautiful, Jake.
I'm gonna murder you.
Way back, machine, I cast you to hell! Way back, machine, I say thee nay! You time machine son of a bitch!
I just can't believe that thing we made up came to life and tried to kill us. I can't believe it happened. Well, you can catch me on Twitch. I'm Holdenator's Ho, and I want to go ahead and say, if you're listening to this close to the time of the recording, April 6th, I am doing a 24-hour stream. It's from 1 p.m. to 1 p.m., April 6th to April 7th.
Holden, that's so dangerous. Don't do it.
It's incredibly dangerous. I'm going to be preparing like some David Copperfield-ass shit. I will only be drinking water, and I will not be eating, which is what I've told is what you're supposed to do.
No.
I'm just kidding. I will be eating. Jake will be joining us. Well, I forget what time are we doing again for you?
You'll just have to watch the whole thing, idiots.
There you go. And Marcus will be joining us on Thursday night. It's going to be a hell of a show, and I hope you can join me as I attempt to try to not have a nightmare day job and live like a fun, creative, interesting life. Jake?
I will be working at a 9-to-5 slog. But you can go to dorkly.com and see stuff.
Dorkly.
It's dorkly. It's fun.
It's cool.
Follow me at Best Jake Young. I'm only getting angrier with each passing day. Go to the Drawfee channel on YouTube, where a bunch of friends draw stuff and hang out and make good, funny times. And occasionally I help and make weird voices.
Please rate and review us on iTunes.
Shit, please.
We would greatly appreciate it. Every little rating helps.
Go onto your mom's laptop. I bet she still has iTunes installed. Go into the podcast section and just drop us a little how do you do.
Yeah, just say a hello. Hi. Thank you so much for listening. We love you guys. We'll be back next week with something else. And as we always say, a good evening to you.
A good evening to you.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.